Back on MorningLine, thanks for joining us. Chad Jackson with us, Assistant District Attorney here in Davidson County, headed up the prosecution of RaDonda Vaught, who was convicted this past Friday of criminally negligent homicide, gross negligence of an impaired adult, in the 2017 death of Charlene Murphy, who was given the incorrect drug. A lot of reaction after the fact of the verdict. And again, going to the point, and we talked a bit about this during the break, just to show for, some people want to see the rest of it. My first question this morning was how the DA determines, the difference between criminality and professional negligence. You hit on a few of the items, a few of the things, and we can show the rest of them. Some 17 mistakes you say she made, which is what led to the level, you say, that you decided you should bring criminal charges.
Well, the grand jury heard the information first and issued the charges. I took the case and decided that this was egregious enough that it probably did need to go to a jury. All right, and
we showed the first half of that. I think we have another, just to finish it off, to give people an idea, and you may agree or disagree with what some of these are, or what are some of the others there. Did not scan the medication and the patient waistband prior to giving the drug?
Yes, she failed to verify that, she had the proper patient in front of her, and then didn't scan the wristband, didn't scan the medication, which would have then gone back into the system and shown that the vecuronium bromide had not been ordered for the patient. So then she did not check the medication name on the vial, which is important to do, especially when you're reconstituting a medication like this, which Versed does not require reconstitution, which should have been another red flag for her that something was amiss in this situation. But as I explained earlier, the warning sign on top of the cap would have been noticed 3 separate times during the reconstitution process, but she failed to do that and didn't pay any attention to the warning on the label. Also, she didn't check the patient's vitals before giving the drug. Versed is a sedative. Therefore, she should have checked the blood pressure to see if the patient was okay. She didn't monitor the patient for the reaction to the drug. And important here was the order was for 1 to 2 milligrams. So 1 initially, another one if she needed more. But Ms. Vaught gave the medication. The testimony was pretty clear, extremely clear, that she immediately walked out of the room and left. So she didn't see if the 2nd milligram or milliliter of the vecuronium or the Versed was needed based on if the first one worked or not. And she should have waited for the reaction time, which would have been 3 to 5 to 10 minutes, to see if that worked. But instead, she left, didn't monitor the patient's vitals after, which she should have checked blood pressure, pulse ox, and things of that nature, and then left Charlene Murphy alone in a room with no proper supervision.
I'm wondering, and as you see that list, you can say, okay, most people would look at that and say, wow. I'm wondering, though, when this first happened and you started getting some of these details, you're not a medical expert, I'm not a medical expert. Did your office consult with some within the medical community to say, look, we're trying to decide what to do here. This is what we know. Is this standard of care? Or what kind of feedback did you get from maybe nurses and others when you said, look, how bad is this?
Right. We did. The TBI interviewed several nurses, many. The Department of Health interviewed maybe 30 nurses, all surrounding this event, to get the facts. We did consult with an expert, Donna Jones, who testified in our case, and she agreed with us that this was extremely egregious, and there was no excuse for what RaDonda Vaught did.
Let's go next to Catherine. Catherine, good morning. Go ahead, Catherine.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
I had 2 questions for you. The first one is, how exactly did we end up with this nursing expert testifying? Like, what were her credentials, or how did we determine that she would be the expert to testify? But looking at the bigger picture, what did we gain from this?
Okay.
What is the going forward with any of this? As a nurse, why? The family didn't want this. It feels like a re-traumatization of the family, of RaDonda, and it just feels incredibly unnecessary. She's not a threat to anyone. Why did the DA choose to convict or take this and prosecute in this situation?
Okay. Do you want to address on the family first? What contact did you have? Is she correct when she says the family did not want a prosecution?
Right. Well, I'd like to address the fact that her not being a threat to anyone, she was a threat to Charlene Murphy that day. And Charlene Murphy is dead because of that. And that's something that as a prosecutor we have to look at. I have to look at that family, and we did. They were there for the entire trial. And this rumor and narrative going around that the family didn't want her prosecuted is untrue. They forgave RaDonda Vaught because they said Charlene Murphy would have forgiven her. But they still wanted justice because RaDonda Vaught killed their beloved family member, and she died prematurely and unnecessarily as a result of her gross neglect.
Okay, a lot of people too saying, all right, we hear this, but on Facebook I see time and again people saying that this prosecution is an attack on the nursing industry and that the DA's office doesn't understand just the difficulty of the job that nurses face these days, and that, it's RaDonda Vaught doesn't work in a vacuum. It's a team issue, and a lot of people upset that maybe, Vandy wasn't held more accountable.
There's nothing, and I said it in my arguments as well, there's nothing that Vanderbilt could have done in this situation that would have kept RaDonda Vaught from killing Charlene Murphy, because RaDonda Vaught was not paying attention to anything she was doing. She didn't even check the medication. That is paramount. Before you administer a drug to somebody, you should at least look at the vial. And every nurse from the state side, and even the defense's nurse, the witness, agreed that she would have at least checked the medicine, and then that would have alerted her that this is not Versed. I'm giving the wrong medicine. RaDonda Vaught didn't even give Charlene Murphy that basic care in checking the medicine, and now she's dead because of it.
Let's go next to Holly. Holly, good morning. Hello, Holly.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have a few questions, but I am going to initially refer to your quote of, this is the only case that I'm aware of that there is a patient death as a result of such a medication error combined with everything RaDonda Vaught did. So I'm just wondering how much research you did on medication errors. Recent studies of medical errors have estimated errors may account for as many as 251,000 deaths annually in the U.S., making medical errors the third leading cause of death. At the same time, less than 10% of medical errors are reported, and that's from PubMed. Of these 251,000 deaths, every year 7,000 to 9,000 Americans die as a result of medication errors. So you're saying this is so rare and this is so out of the norm, but people who work in healthcare and nurses know that unfortunately that's not true.
Hey, Holly, can I ask you a question? Are you a nurse, Holly?
Yes,
okay.
I am a nurse.
And I'll let him answer your question. You make some good points here. I'm just curious. I've heard that time and again, and I definitely hear your point, and you're absolutely right. There are mistakes all the time. My question, just as a layperson looking at this, it's like one or two mistakes, or gosh, when it's misprescribed, you're absolutely right. But is there a level where, and you heard him run off the 17 mistakes that she made. I mean, at what point do you say, that's just too much ignored? I mean, not every single case you quote there had dozens, potentially, of mistakes made. It may have been 2 or 3 where it was miswritten or a mistake there. And yes, of course, those happen. But I mean, it seems like, does it not matter how many signs or things were missed?
Well, I think that's a great point. And when you bring up there is nothing Vanderbilt could have done to keep RaDonda Vaught from killing Charlene Murphy, it's clear you don't work in the medical field and that you've never given medications. You've never dealt with interface issues between medications and charting systems, or short staffing, or being pulled out of your role to give medications in a different environment without a medication scanner, and even having to get orders for a medication that you have to override. I mean, there are layers upon layers upon layers. And to put that at the feet of one nurse, when we all know the complex system of giving medications and working at Vanderbilt, not that I do, but people know what the system is like. And this is a cultural norm these days.
Okay, and we have a lot of calls, but listen, I think she's giving voice to what a lot of people are saying, I see as well on Facebook here, which is just that. It's like there's a misunderstanding here about how and why this happened, and it's much larger than RaDonda Vaught.
And it could be, but in this case, some of the issues that she was talking about, it not being the connectivity issues, and those facts were not in this case. There were no connectivity issues. She was not overworked. Vanderbilt was not understaffed. She admitted in her interview that she was not tired. She was a help-all nurse, had nothing else, and she had a second nurse with her that could have helped her verify the medicine, and she was just so blind to everything she was doing that led to the death of Charlene Murphy, and the jury agreed with that.
4 hours of deliberation came back with the guilty verdict after a more than 3-day trial. We'll take a break. When we come back, our final segment, more of your phone calls. We'll take a look at some of the questions as well on Facebook. Again, to remind everyone as we go to a break, we're seeking out to talk to the Tennessee Nursing Association this week. Also possibly Peter Stryance and his client, RaDonda Vaught, if they're willing to come on. We have some attorneys as well. Clint Kelly, malpractice attorney, coming on. We'll talk about that this week. Just so you know, we're covering all bases on this. We'll be back with more with our guest this morning, Chad Jackson, the prosecutor, right after this.